The cafe was so quiet you could hear the hiss of the espresso machine when my daughter shoved the folder back at me. "You're a washed-up entrepreneur, Mom. Stop embarrassing yourself." People turned to stare, whispering behind their hands. My cheeks burned with shame, but I kept my chin high, gripping my teacup so tightly it rattled against the saucer. The ceramic felt cold against my palms as I watched Ashley's face twist with disgust. I'd driven 40 minutes through morning traffic to meet her here, rehearsing what I'd say during every red light. I'd spent 3 sleepless nights preparing this business plan, analyzing every detail of her failing bakery. The folder contained solutions that could save her dream, and my investment. "Ashley, please just look at..." "No." Her voice cut through the air like a blade. "Your methods are ancient. This isn't 1995, Mom." The elderly couple at the next table exchanged uncomfortable glances. A young mother quickly turned her toddler away from our scene. I felt every pair of eyes in the cafe boring into me, judging the woman whose own daughter treated her like a fool. She smirked and leaned in, voice low but loud enough for everyone to hear. "Why don't you just go knit something?" "My name is Victoria Stone. I'm 63 years old, and I spent 3 decades building one of the most successful bakery chains in the Midwest before selling it for millions. I'm not some meddling retiree desperate for attention. I'm a woman who sacrificed half my retirement fund to help my only daughter build her dream bakery empire. And this public humiliation, was my repayment. 27 years ago, I held Ashley as a newborn, promising her the world would be hers for the taking. I worked 16-hour days so she could have piano lessons, art classes, the best education money could buy. When she graduated business school, I cried with pride. When she announced her bakery dream, I believed in her completely. Maybe that was my mistake. Believing too much, caring too deeply, trusting that love would be enough. I built Stone's sweet success from nothing. Started in my kitchen, selling cookies to neighbors who became loyal customers. By the time I sold the chain, we had 42 locations across 5 states. Every success taught me something. Every failure made me stronger. But sitting in that cafe, watching my daughter's contemptuous stare, none of that mattered. I forced a polite smile, but inside, something hardened. Something shifted that would change everything. "I'm just trying to help you," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. The folder sat between us like a wall of rejection, its pages containing months of careful analysis. She laughed, loud enough for the entire cafe to turn and look again. "Help? Your methods belong in a museum, Mom. This is the Instagram age. You wouldn't understand." Her laughter echoed off the walls, sharp and cruel. A businessman in the corner shook his head disapprovingly. The barista paused mid-pour, obviously listening. I felt their pity wash over me like cold water, each sympathetic glance another small humiliation. "Your bakery is losing money," I whispered urgently. "The numbers don't lie, sweetheart." "My numbers are fine," she snapped, standing abruptly. Her chair scraped against the floor with a sound that made everyone wince. "Maybe if you'd kept up with the times instead of retiring, you'd understand modern business." She grabbed her designer purse, one I'd bought her for her birthday, and stormed toward the door. Every eye in the cafe followed her dramatic exit, then swiveled back to me with uncomfortable sympathy. I sat frozen, my hand still on the folder she'd rejected, fighting back tears that threatened to spill. 2 years ago, I sat in the same cafe, sliding a $250,000 check across this very table. Ashley had cried then, reaching across to hug me tight, calling me the smartest woman she knew. Her tears had been joy, not anger, hope instead of contempt. "Mom, this changes everything," she'd whispered, voice thick with emotion. "I can finally make my dream real." I remembered her excitement as she described her vision with animated gestures. An upscale bakery featuring artisanal breads, custom cakes, and Instagram-worthy pastries. She painted pictures with her words, exposed brick walls, vintage lighting, the perfect blend of rustic charm and modern sophistication. "I want to build something as amazing as what you built," she'd said, squeezing my hands. "I want to make you proud." Those words had melted my heart completely. I'd liquidated conservative investments, cashed in bonds, restructured my retirement portfolio. For her dream, for my daughter. Because I believed in her completely and wanted nothing more than her happiness. Now, looking at that same table where she'd once thanked me with tears of gratitude, I wondered if I'd ever known my daughter at all. But I hadn't even seen the worst of it yet. That night, I pored over her financials. She'd left them in the folder she threw back at me. Under the harsh kitchen light, the numbers told a devastating story that made my stomach churn with dread. $50,000 spent on influencer partnerships that generated zero measurable returns. $30,000 for trendy equipment that sat unused. Designer fixtures that cost more than my first car. Every line item screamed of inexperience and waste. My hands trembled as I turned the pages, seeing my careful investment evaporating into vanity projects and poor decisions. The monthly burn rate was astronomical. At this pace, she'd be bankrupt in 6 months. But the worst discovery came on page 12, a detailed breakdown of creditors and investors. My heart stopped when I saw the list. There, in black and white, was my own name listed as her largest creditor, not investor. Creditor. She owed me everything, and from these numbers, she had no way to pay me back. My retirement security was tied to a sinking ship, and my daughter didn't even care enough to listen to my concerns. My hands shook as I closed the folder. I called her that night, desperate to help despite the humiliation. She answered on the 4th ring, voice already irritated. "What, Mom?" The coldness in those 2 words hit me like a physical blow. This was my daughter, my only child, speaking to me like I was some telemarketer interrupting her evening. "Ashley, honey, I looked at your numbers. We need to talk about." She laughed, that same cruel sound from the cafe. "You're not current, Mom. This isn't your world anymore. Social media marketing, brand partnerships, influencer engagement, you wouldn't understand any of it. But the debt ratios, stay out of it." The line went dead. I sat there holding the phone long after the dial tone started, staring at the financial documents spread across my kitchen table. A single tear slid down my cheek, landing on the page that showed her declining revenue. For 40 years I'd solved problems, built businesses, created something from nothing. But I couldn't reach my own daughter. I couldn't make her see what was right in front of her face. That was the moment I decided I would never cry over this again. I opened my old leather notebook, the one where I'd built my first empire. The pages were yellowed with age, filled with strategy notes, supplier contacts, and business plans that had made me millions. Running my fingers over the familiar handwriting, I felt something awaken inside me. If she wouldn't take my help, fine. I'd remind myself, and everyone else, who I really was. The first call was to Tom Richards, my old flower supplier. His voice brightened when he heard mine. "Victoria Stone, I thought you'd disappeared forever. How's retirement treating you?" "It's not," I said simply. "Tom, I need to ask you something. Are you still supplying premium flower?" "Of course." "Why?" "I might be getting back in the game." His laugh was warm and genuine. "I've been waiting for this call for years, Victoria. You were the best client I ever had. Professional, punctual, never haggled over quality. What do you need?" Calmly, I started making more calls. Each conversation rekindled something I'd forgotten, the respect I'd earned, the relationships I'd built, the reputation that 40 years of excellence had created. By midnight, I had a plan. Within 2 weeks, I quietly purchased a failing bakery across town under an LLC called Heritage Foods. The owner, desperate to sell, practically threw the keys at me when I offered cash. I walked into the dusty shop on a Tuesday morning, my footsteps echoing in the empty space. Sunlight streamed through windows that needed washing, illuminating years of neglect. But underneath the grime, I saw potential. The bones were good. Solid brick walls, original hardwood floors, a kitchen that just needed updating. I ran my fingers along the old counter, remembering my first bakery, the excitement of possibility. This was where my comeback would begin. The space smelled of old bread and missed opportunities, but I could already envision fresh paint, new equipment, the aroma of my signature cinnamon rolls filling the air. I'd built something from nothing before. I could do it again. My phone rang. It was Janet Mills, my former head baker who'd worked with me for 15 years before retiring. "Mrs. Stone, I heard through the grapevine that you might be baking again?" I smiled for the first time in weeks. "Tell me where and when. I'm in." One by one, I recruited loyal former employees, people my daughter had dismissed as too old-fashioned when I'd suggested she hire them. They came eagerly, grateful for the chance to work with someone who valued experience over Instagram followers. Janet arrived first, her silver hair pulled back in the familiar bun I remembered. "I've missed this," she said, surveying the empty kitchen. "These old hands still know how to make magic happen." Frank Rodriguez, my former operations manager, drove 3 hours to meet me. "Mrs. Stone, I've been managing a chain restaurant, but it's not the same. They care more about profit margins than product quality." Together, we scrubbed floors until they gleamed. We revamped the menu with time-tested recipes that had made Stone's sweet success famous. We rebuilt operations with the efficiency that only comes from decades of experience. Late nights became the norm. My back ached from the physical work, but my spirit soared. This felt right, building something meaningful with people who understood quality. Opening day was approaching fast. I just learned from Janet's niece, who worked at Ashley's flagship store, that my daughter planned to open a new location nearby. The irony wasn't lost on me. Opening day arrived with October's crisp air and golden sunlight. The first morning was slow, just a few curious neighbors and early commuters grabbing coffee. I greeted each customer personally, just like old times, my heart racing with nervous excitement. By noon, something magical happened. Rebecca Chen, a well-known food blogger, wandered in. I recognized her immediately from her online reviews that could make or break restaurants across the city. She ordered my signature apple cinnamon scone and maple walnut coffee cake. I watched nervously as she took her first bite, then saw her eyes light up with genuine surprise. By evening, a line stretched out the door. Rebecca's Instagram post had gone viral. "Hidden gem alert. This is what real baking tastes like." Forget the trendy spots, this is where the magic happens. Customers shared photos of our rustic interior and perfect pastries. Comments poured in praising the authentic atmosphere and incredible flavors. My phone buzzed constantly with notifications. As I locked up that night, exhausted but exhilarated, I noticed someone familiar in the shadows across the street. Ashley's assistant, tablet in hand, was photographing our storefront and taking detailed notes. My daughter called the next morning, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. "I heard you're playing baker again." I cradled the phone against my shoulder while kneading bread dough, my hands working the familiar rhythm that centered my thoughts. "Just keeping busy, dear. Retirement was getting boring." The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if she'd hung up. When she finally spoke, her voice had lost some of its usual confidence. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Tell you what?" That you were opening a bakery in my territory." Her territory, as if she owned the entire city's baking industry. I smiled into the phone, continuing to work the dough. "I didn't realize I needed permission." "This is ridiculous, Mom. You're 63 years old. You should be playing golf or taking cruises, not trying to relive your glory days." But underneath the dismissive words, I heard something new. Uncertainty. The cocky confidence was cracking just slightly. She hung up abruptly, but I knew she was already worried. Good. Maybe now she'd understand what real competition felt like. Within days, familiar faces started appearing at my shop, former customers of Ashley's Bakery who remembered the quality I used to deliver. They came tentatively at first, then regularly, drawn by the consistent excellence they'd been missing. Mrs. Patterson, who'd been a regular at my original Stone Sweet Success, became a daily visitor. "Victoria, I tried your daughter's place when it opened. Nice Instagram photos, but the bread was dry and flavorless. This," she held up a warm dinner roll. "This is what I remember." Others shared similar stories. The young mother who'd watched my cafe humiliation whispered conspiratorially across the counter, "Her place looks pretty, but it's all style and no substance. Plus, the staff acts like they're doing you a favor just for taking your order." Dr. Williams, who used to order birthday cakes for his grandchildren, shook his head sadly. "I ordered a custom cake from her bakery last month. $50 more than I used to pay you, and it tasted like cardboard." My grandson took one bite and asked for store-bought instead. One afternoon, Mrs. Chen leaned over the counter and whispered urgently, "Her place is falling apart. Staff turnover is constant, and I heard she can't pay her suppliers on time." An old investor friend, Marcus Thompson, visited on a Thursday afternoon, ostensibly buying coffee but clearly wanting to talk business. We'd known each other for 20 years through various business ventures and mutual respect. "Margaret, I need to tell you something," he said, stirring his coffee thoughtfully. "Your daughter approached me last month about additional funding." I kept my expression neutral, though my heart raced. "Oh? Her numbers are bad, Victoria. Really bad. Declining revenue, mounting debt, no clear path to profitability. She's burning through cash like it's kindling." He shook his head grimly. "I had to turn her down. Any investor would." I continued wiping down the counter, processing this information. Ashley had been seeking money from other sources, which meant she was more desperate than she'd let on during our confrontation. She seemed surprised that I wouldn't invest based on social media followers alone, Marcus continued. She kept talking about brand visibility and market presence instead of actual profit margins. That evening, I noticed something interesting. Ashley had suddenly canceled all her expensive influencer partnerships. The sponsored posts that had cluttered her Instagram feed disappeared overnight. Desperation was setting in. She appeared at my bakery the following Monday, walking in during the afternoon lull when only a few customers browsed the display cases. Her designer heels clicked sharply against the hardwood floors as she approached the counter where I was arranging fresh cookies. "Tell me what you're doing," she demanded without preamble, her voice tense and strained. I looked up calmly, continuing to arrange the oatmeal raisin cookies in perfect rows. Baking bread, making coffee, serving customers, the usual things. "Don't play games with me." Her fists clenched at her sides. "You're stealing my customers." An elderly gentleman reading his newspaper in the corner glanced up disapprovingly at her raised voice. Two women sharing afternoon tea paused their conversation to listen. "I'm not stealing anyone," I replied evenly. "People choose where to spend their money. I'm just giving them what they want. Quality products at fair prices with friendly service." Her face flushed red. "This is sabotage." I smiled gently, the same patient smile I'd given her as a child when she threw tantrums. "This is business, Ashley. Competition makes everyone better." She stormed toward the door, then turned back with blazing eyes. "We'll see how long you last, old woman." The elderly gentleman folded his newspaper with a sharp snap and shook his head. By November, Ashley's staff began quitting in droves. They were frustrated with unpaid bonuses, erratic schedules, and her increasingly volatile temper as financial pressures mounted. Several quietly applied to my shop, sharing horror stories about working conditions. "She screams at us when orders are wrong," confided Maria, a talented decorator who'd worked for Ashley for 8 months. "But she never trained us properly, and she keeps changing procedures without warning." Another former employee, Tyler, explained the toxic atmosphere. "She makes us work double shifts when people quit, but promises she can't afford overtime pay right now. She says she'll make it up to us when business improves, but it never seems to get better." The most damaging revelation came from Jessica, Ashley's former assistant manager. "She's been blaming her mother for everything. Says Mrs. Stone is trying to ruin her out of jealousy. She makes us badmouth your bakery to customers who ask about it." I hired Maria and Tyler immediately. Their skills were excellent, and their relief at working in a positive environment was obvious. They brought fresh energy and genuine enthusiasm to our team. That weekend, Jessica whispered something that made my blood run cold. "She's planning something big. I don't know what, but she's been making angry phone calls about you." Ashley's desperation manifested in the worst possible way. She began copying everything I did. When I introduced weekly fresh bread specials, she launched identical promotions the next day. When I started hosting Saturday morning baking classes for children, she announced her own kids' workshops. But imitation without understanding breeds failure. Her promotions lacked the personal touch that made mine special. Her bread classes were taught by inexperienced staff who couldn't answer basic questions about ingredients or techniques. Online reviews reflected the difference. My workshops earned comments like, "Mrs. Stone made my daughter feel like a real baker," and educational, fun, and delicious results. Ashley's received feedback such as, "Felt rushed and impersonal," and "My son was bored and learned nothing." Her copycat attempts became increasingly frantic. She even tried to poach Janet by offering double her current salary, not understanding that loyalty and respect can't be bought. The final straw came when she went live on Instagram, nearly in tears, begging followers for support. Small businesses need community love, she pleaded, voice shaking. Please choose local over corporate chains. The irony was profound. She was calling my single bakery a corporate chain, while her 3 locations were hemorrhaging money and staff. Marcus called me on a Tuesday morning with news that didn't surprise me, but still felt significant. Victoria, I thought you should know, we're pulling out of Ashley's business completely. The other investors are following suit. I paused in my inventory counting, phone pressed to my ear. All of you? Every single one. She won't listen to advice, won't implement necessary changes, and keeps blaming external factors for internal problems. Yesterday's meeting was the final straw. She actually accused us of conspiring with you to destroy her. The paranoia had reached a new level. In Ashley's mind, everyone who didn't support her unconditionally was part of some vast conspiracy rather than simply making sound business decisions. She burned through the emergency funding we provided last month, Marcus continued. Used it for more social media marketing instead of addressing core operational issues. We can't throw good money after bad. That evening, my phone buzzed with a bitter text from Ashley. Are you happy now? You've turned everyone against me. I stared at the message for a long time before deleting it without responding. Her anger was misdirected, but her pain was real. 2 of Ashley's locations closed within a month, unable to sustain the mounting losses. I learned about it not from her, but from the local business journal's brief announcement buried on page 4. Walking past her flagship store one rainy evening, I saw the signs of desperation. Bright yellow sale banners covered the windows. A handwritten sign offered 50% off all pastries after 3 p.m. The once pristine storefront looked tired and neglected. Through the rain-streaked windows, I glimpsed debt collectors inside, men in suits examining equipment and taking notes on clipboards. Ashley stood behind the counter, arms crossed defensively, watching her dreams being catalogued and appraised. Part of me wanted to walk away, to avoid witnessing her humiliation. But another part, the mother part, couldn't leave. I stood under my umbrella in the gathering darkness, watching my daughter face the consequences of her choices. The collectors left with briefcases full of documents. Ashley locked the door behind them, then slumped against the glass, shoulders shaking with exhaustion or tears. I couldn't tell which. When she looked up and saw me standing across the street, our eyes met through the rain and window glass. She appeared in my doorway that same evening, drenched from the storm and defeated in a way I'd never seen before. Her expensive clothes were soaked, her makeup streaked with rain and tears. The confident young woman who'd humiliated me in the cafe was gone, replaced by someone broken and desperate. Mom, she whispered, voice barely audible above the rain drumming on my windows. I was wrong. Please, help me. For a moment, I saw not the cruel daughter who'd rejected my advice, but the little girl I'd once held during thunderstorms, promising her that everything would be okay. My heart wanted to reach out, to comfort and fix everything like I had when she was small. Instead, I walked to the back office and retrieved a familiar folder, the same business plan she'd thrown back at me months ago. I slid it across the counter between us, just as I had that day in the cafe. This is still viable, I said quietly. The numbers still work. The strategies are still sound. She picked up the folder with trembling hands, water dripping from her hair onto the papers. This is the same plan. I nodded. The same one you called old-fashioned and outdated, she whispered, almost inaudibly. Will you invest again? I took a deep breath, looking at my daughter's desperate face. The woman who'd publicly humiliated me, who'd called me washed up and irrelevant, who'd blamed me for her failures. The same woman who was also my only child, the baby I'd rocked to sleep and the girl I'd cheered at every school play. No, I said firmly. Not this time. You'll have to rebuild on your own. Her face crumpled like paper in the rain. Tears mixed with rainwater on her cheeks as the reality hit her. The safety net she'd always counted on was gone. But I don't know how, she whispered. I don't know how to do it without help. Then you'll learn, I replied, keeping my voice steady despite the pain in my chest. The same way I learned 40 years ago, through hard work, humility, and listening to people who know more than you do. She nodded slowly, understanding finally dawning in her eyes. This wasn't cruelty. It was the hardest lesson of love I could give her. As she turned toward the door, shoulders squared with new determination, she whispered, "I hope I can be like you someday." The words hit me harder than any insult she'd ever thrown. I watched her disappear into the rain, feeling no anger, only a profound peace I hadn't experienced in months. The satisfaction wasn't from her downfall, but from the knowledge that sometimes the most loving thing a parent can do is refuse to enable destructive behavior. Through my windows, I could see customers still arriving despite the weather, drawn by the warm light and the promise of quality that consistent effort had built. My small bakery hummed with the steady rhythm of honest business. No gimmicks, no shortcuts, just reliable excellence. This hadn't been about revenge. Ashley had done this to herself through pride, poor judgment, and refusal to accept guidance. I'd simply reminded the market what real quality looked like. My phone buzzed with a text from Janet. "Tomorrow's special orders are ready for pickup. 17 birthday cakes, 3 wedding consultations, and the Henderson anniversary celebration. We're booked solid through next month." I smiled, looking around the bakery that had become more than just a business. It was proof that experience and integrity still mattered in a world obsessed with flash and superficiality. A long line of customers waited at my counter, chatting warmly with my staff, their faces bright with satisfaction. 2 weeks later, a journalist from the City Business Journal came by during the lunch rush. She was young, probably Ashley's age, with a notebook full of questions about my remarkable comeback story. "Mrs. Stone, people are calling this David versus Goliath, but in reverse. The established veteran beating the young upstart. How does that feel?" I smiled politely while boxing up a dozen dinner rolls for Mrs. Patterson. "I prefer not to think of it in competitive terms. We're just baking good bread and treating customers well." "But surely you must feel vindicated after the way your daughter treated you publicly?" The question stung because it touched on something I'd tried not to examine too closely. Did I feel vindicated? Yes. Was that why I'd done this? The honest answer was more complicated. "Every parent wants their children to succeed," I said carefully. "Sometimes the greatest success comes from learning hard lessons." She pressed for more details, but I declined further comment. The story wasn't about personal drama. It was about the value of experience, the importance of quality, and the patient work of building something meaningful. The article still ran the following week with the headline, "The Queen of Honest Baking Returns." Ashley came in one quiet Tuesday morning, just buying bread. No fanfare, no dramatic confrontation. She simply waited in line like any other customer, ordered a loaf of sourdough and 2 cinnamon rolls, and paid without making eye contact. But there was something different about her. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a quiet humility that reminded me of the thoughtful child she'd once been. She wore simple clothes instead of designer outfits, and her hands showed the calluses that come from actual work. "Thank you," she said when I handed her the bag, and for the first time in years, it sounded genuine. No words about business, no accusations or arguments, just a respectful nod and a generous tip left on the counter, more than the cost of her entire order. Later, as I was cleaning up, I found a small note tucked under the tip jar. "I'm learning, starting over with a food truck, using your business plan. Thank you for not giving up on me even when I gave up on myself." I held the note for a long time, feeling tears I hadn't expected. This was what victory actually looked like. Not her failure, but her willingness to begin again with wisdom earned through suffering. Spring arrived with the promise of new beginnings. Ashley's food truck, called Second Chance's Bakery, appeared at the farmers market on Saturday mornings. I heard from customers that she was working 16-hour days, doing everything herself. Baking, serving, cleaning, managing inventory. "She's completely different," reported Mrs. Chen, who'd bought lunch from Ashley's truck. "Humble, hard-working, genuinely grateful for every customer. The food is simple but well-made. She's actually listening to feedback instead of dismissing it." I felt proud hearing these reports, though I was careful not to make direct contact. This journey was hers to make alone. But knowing she was applying the lessons from my old business plan, building slowly and sustainably instead of chasing flashy expansion, gave me deep satisfaction. One evening, as I locked up my own bakery, I saw Ashley's truck parked across town, a small line of customers waiting for her homemade sandwiches and cookies. Through the service window, I glimpsed her smiling genuinely at a customer, not the practiced smile of someone seeking social media content, but the real joy of someone who'd found purpose in honest work. She was learning what I'd tried to teach her years ago. Success isn't about appearances. It's about serving others well. I closed my bakery that final Friday evening of spring, watching happy customers leave with bags full of weekend treats for their families. The satisfaction ran deeper than profit margins or competitive victories. It came from the knowledge that I'd built something meaningful that enriched people's daily lives. My daughter might rebuild her business successfully, but that was her journey now. Mine was complete. I'd proven to myself, to her, and to everyone who'd witnessed that humiliating scene in the cafe, that experience and integrity still mattered in a world increasingly obsessed with shortcuts and superficiality. The greatest victory wasn't her downfall, it was her transformation. Watching her learn humility, develop real skills, and find genuine purpose had given me something more valuable than any business success. The knowledge that I'd raised a daughter who could learn from her mistakes and become better. As I turned off the lights and locked the door, I reflected on the lesson this whole experience had taught me. Knowing your worth isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving yourself right and never letting anyone convince you you're done before you are. Sometimes the most profound act of love is refusing to rescue someone who needs to save themselves.